Hello students, welcome to the EPG Pathshala course on crime prevention. Today I am discussing with you the module number 20, which is conventional programs for crime prevention, rural versus urban. In this module, we will be trying to understand the distinction between the causal mechanisms of crime in rural and urban areas, differentiate the factors to be considered in designing programs for prevention in rural and urban areas, and rural crime prevention programs. Rural crime versus urban crime. Rural crime may be defined as the crime occurring in rural areas. Rural areas are so designated by governments on the basis of several socio-economic indicators as well as population density. In general, rural areas tend to be sparsely populated and contain smaller settlements such as villages and sometimes towns, and have traditionally relied on agriculture as their economic basis. Rural communities are often closely knit socially, but may also be physically secluded, which may cause some problems of access to transport and other services. There are a large number of crimes, for example, vehicle crime, violent crime and burglary that take place both in rural and urban localities. However, the consequences of these crimes and the way of dealing with them may differ because of the rural context. There are also a small number of crimes that tend to be mainly affecting the rural areas. For example, stealing agricultural machinery or livestock are less common elsewhere. Research in the West has indicated that people living in rural areas have lower perception of antisocial behavior. Similarly, compared to their urban counterparts, they tend to worry less about crime. The issues related to crime are also different, such as businesses closing or relocating, as in some urban areas. Small businesses which may not have large profit margins often dominates the rural economy. Consequently, the costs of crime to small rural businesses may force them to close or relocate. This can impact on employment levels and can increase social exclusion locally. Isolation. Rural victims of crime often live apart from families and close friends, and so do not always have a support network they can rely on. Similarly, rural victims of crime may be less aware of and able to access victim support services that non-rural victims may get. Prevention through similar types of crime occur in urban and rural areas. The reasons for them happening and the ways of trying to prevent them may be very different. For example, to prevent vehicle theft, it is not necessarily practical to implement urban target hardening measures such as CCTV and security patrol in rural areas. Other creative solutions are likely to be required. Underreporting of hate crimes. Rural residents may be reluctant to report certain type of incidents, for example, crimes motivated by prejudice against their race or sexuality. This is often due to the lack of support services available or a lack of awareness about services which do exist. Now let us look at causes of rural crime. Rural crime occurs within a unique culture. This is a culture characterized by traditional belief systems and always of doing things, community attitudes about how to deal with crime, and strong attachments to privacy, friendship and family ties. The existence of these factors means that residents may be less likely to report crimes to the police because they do not want their neighbors, friends or family members to be arrested, or because they are afraid of retaliation from known perpetrators. People living in rural communities may also prefer to handle conflicts on their own rather than resort to urban-style law and order interventions. Added to this is the reality that many rural communities are very remote or isolated from urban centers. This means that even if residents would like criminal justice or social institutions to be involved in dispute resolution or responding to crime, access to and availability of these services are limited. Many young people today who have grown up in the rural areas desire to move to the big city to get an education, find jobs or increase their social status. With access to popular culture through television and internet, rural youth are at risk to many new types of crimes. Cyberbullying, internet child luring and violent and pornographic imagery, for example. In addition, parents may be unable to pass on the attributes of rural culture to their children because of these outside influences. As a result, young people are exposed to different types of crime than their parents were and may not subscribe to the same belief about how to resolve conflicts or deal with crime as their parents. This can lead to a generational conflict between the younger and the older generations. Once the crime problem for a given community has been assessed, that community then has to determine what resources they have available to implement a crime prevention program. Example, money, people, equipment, etc. Crime prevention strategies should be chosen based on a balance between the needs of the community, the available resources, and the evidence-based practices that have been shown to work in preventing rural crime. Every crime prevention program should also include an ongoing evaluation component by which the effectiveness of the program can be measured. This should include a replication of the initial needs assessment to determine whether crime levels have decreased, increased, or stayed the same. There are a number of different approaches to crime prevention that can be applied in rural areas. Crime prevention through environmental design. This is the first one of the types. Focuses on the planning and infrastructure of communities to prevent crime. Examples in the rural context may include installing motion sensor lighting on barns to illuminate potential offenders or designing farm equipment storage areas in view of the house. The second one, crime prevention through social development or CPSD, involves a number of different strategies including community development, school-based prevention, public education campaigns, and developmental prevention, for example, early childhood intervention. The third one is situational prevention, which involves increasing the risks and reducing the rewards of committing specific crimes. Example in the rural context might include marking farm equipment with an identification number so that it cannot be easily sold, or maintaining rigorous inventory lists to quickly identify if anything has been stolen. Most approaches to rural crime prevention have stemmed from the situational prevention approach, though there are some promising practices in other areas. However, very few rural crime prevention programs have been evaluated. Now we look at rural versus urban conventional programs for crime prevention. The first one is Community Watch. Community Watch programs are a type of situational crime prevention aimed at increasing the risk of criminal activity. Many rural areas have community or neighborhood association that engage in community watch programs. These groups comprise of individuals who have a vested interest in the rural community, residents, business owners, or house owners, for example. The objective of these organizations are to reduce the opportunity for crime to occur by improving security practices, engaging in neighborhood surveillance, participating in crime prevention awareness programs, and facilitating communication between the residents and the police. Research on neighborhood associations has found that when community members take policing upon themselves, the individuals who have been policed become socially separated from their own community, which may not be the best approach to reducing crime. Indeed, evaluations of neighborhood watch programs in urban areas have found that programs only using a watch component were ineffective at preventing crime. An effective neighborhood watch program would work at multiple levels and include home security inspections, tracking devices on farm equipment, and signs indicating that the equipment are being monitored. An effective program would also foster partnerships between police, local residents, and other community agencies and the criminal justice services. To date, there are no rigorous evaluations of rural community watch programs. Second one is the crime prevention through environmental design. Crime prevention through environmental design, or CPTED, or designing and constructing buildings and public spaces with an eye to preventing crime. It is a popular approach to crime prevention. For example, a rural community college in West Virginia installed a two-way communication system in all of its classrooms in an effort to prevent campus tragedies. The communication system includes an emergency paging system and the ability to broadcast campus-wide announcements. The college evaluates the communication system with practice drills involving students, employees, and community response partners to improve crisis preparedness. Some researchers are examining the usefulness of second-generation crime prevention through environmental design for preventing rural domestic violence against women. Second-generation CPT-ED goes beyond the physical environment and works to ready communities to support certain crime prevention initiatives. Researchers have looked at the case of domestic violence and theorized that second-generation CPT-ED could work to change community norms, beliefs, and values that support or tolerate women abuse. Specifically, the researchers suggest, number 1, organizing cultural events to sensitize the community to the issue of domestic violence, example plays, festivals, etc. Second, creating safe spaces for women in rural communities and spaces for anti-violence men to build networks. And 3, teaching positive communication skills and conflict resolution. The third type of prevention, crime prevention through social development. The idea of community readiness for crime prevention in rural settings is examined in an American study which focused on community development, an important concept in crime prevention through social development. This researcher looked at the concept of social capital, or how much residents trusted each other, worked in cooperation, and developed partnerships with the law enforcement and other community and political stakeholders, example churches, schools, local governments, etc. The objective of this study was to find out if social capital is connected to the ability of a rural community to engage in an effective crime prevention initiative. Building up social capital is considered an effective approach to crime prevention in rural areas because many communities are already tight-knit and characterized by close social or familial relationships. The researcher suggests that local agencies should take a more proactive role in engaging citizens to prevent crime in their community. Specifically, rural police should collaborate with local residents on crime prevention programs. Example, meetings, town hall meetings, community-based task force, and citizens patrols. And rural residents should participate in community crime prevention programs. Example, community watch and neighborhood associations. An early American study of rural residents' willingness to participate in an auxiliary policing crime prevention program found that fear of crime or victimization had actually little impact on residents' participation. Residents mostly like to participate in this type of crime prevention initiatives, those who are young, less educated, and male. Researchers in Florida developed the Smart Life program for rural African American youth aged 12 through 18. This program aims to foster independent and productive lifestyles through goal-oriented planning and empowerment. Seminars are held in various community locations, example schools, community centers, churches, etc., with topics including the meaning of being an African American, the history of African people, and the prevention of crime and violence, early sexual experiences and pregnancy, alcohol and drug abuse, and school failure. While the researchers provide anecdotal evidence of the positive effect of the program and on the youth participants, they also suggest that programs should include parents in the education as well as the possibility of community-based safe house for particularly at-risk youth. Another program designed for rural African American families is the promising program Strong African American Families SAAF, supported by the Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence at the University of Colorado. SAAF is a family-centered program designed to prevent alcohol and drug abuse among rural African American youth aged 10 to 12 years and to improve the parenting practices of their caregivers. The program consists of 7 weekly meetings involving youth and caregivers, sharing a meal, separating into 2 groups to watch age and role appropriate videos and engage in discussion, and then to reconvene to practice learned skills. The youth program content focuses on setting goals, learning skills to resist drug use, and developing negative attitudes towards drug and alcohol use. The caregiver content covers communication skills, limit settings, racial socialization skills, and how to establish clear expectations about alcohol and drug use. An evaluation of this program found that youth who participated in the program were less likely to start using alcohol, and those who did increase their use less over the time than youth who did not participate in the program. SEAF is based on the Promising Strengthening Families program SFP for parents and youth aged 10 to 14 years. This program has been implemented in 33 rural schools in the American Midwest. It focuses on improving family communication and reducing risk factors for adolescent problems. Parents learn communication skills including how to communicate expectations of children's behavior, consistent discipline techniques, and how to manage their emotions. Youth learn peer resistance and refusal techniques, social interaction skills, and how to manage stress and their emotions. Families then come together to practice conflict resolution and communication skills. In an evaluation, this program improved parents-child management practices, increased parent-child communication, and strengthened family cohesiveness. Youth who participated in the program had lower rates of alcohol use than youth who had not participated in the program. Another promising program is the school-based Project Northland, designed to reduce adolescent alcohol use. This program has been implemented in rural communities and targets youth in grades 7 to 9, and then again grades 11 to 12 in the USA. Each school year is based on a specific theme: child-parent communication, alcohol resistance skills, active citizenship, alcohol-related peer pressure, and changing alcohol-related social norms. An evaluation after 3 years of the program found that youth who participated were less likely to drink, and when they did drink, they drank less alcohol and had better communication with their parents about the consequences of drinking than those who did not participate. A longitudinal evaluation of the Project Northland found that youth who had participated in the 6 years of the program were less likely to increase their use of alcohol, and parents had stricter rules regarding teen alcohol use than individuals who did not participate. Next, we look at policing in rural areas. Policing in rural areas usually involves some form of community policing. A study in Australia found that many officers in rural communities found policing in rural communities to be an impossible job. Difficulties officers had with the policing rural communities stemmed from residents' rationalization of certain crimes. Example, drunk or young people just having a good time, and their lack of cooperation with the police. The most effective police officers in their rural areas utilized traditional community policing. Police officers integrated themselves into the community and exercised their judgment when it came to community standards of behavior. In Western Australia, another approach to rural policing derived from the rural crime prevention strategy of the Office of Crime Prevention which is a multi-agency approach. This multi-agency approach engages police officers, different government departments, community-based agencies, private agencies, and volunteers to police rural communities. In one study of this approach, the researcher found that multi-agency policing has the potential to be more inclusive form of policing, though it is still mainly driven by the government. In the USA, rural policing of illicit drug production has expanded in some jurisdictions to include community members as well as the police in a multi-agency approach. New anti-drug legislation at the state level has called on residents, pharmacists, retail clerks, natural resource officers and others in the rural areas to police the purchasing and use of cold medicine, batteries and drain cleaner chemicals, all used in the production of methamphetamine. Individual police departments offer a number of property crime prevention tips for rural residents that can be found on their websites. These tips include checking and using the locks on doors and windows, keeping outside areas well lit, keeping fences in good repair, posting no trespassing signs, marking identification numbers on equipment and tools, tattooing livestock, keeping guns and small equipment in a secure place, storing large equipment in a barn or shed overnight, storing harvested crops in locked locations, keeping a rigorous inventory of supplies, making houses appear occupied at all times with timers and motion sensor lights, reporting anything suspicious to law enforcement. Other police departments have developed dedicated rural safety or rural crime prevention strategies. In the United Kingdom, the Rural Safety Strategy engages rural community members to solve crime problems at the local level. Central to this initiative is the creation of rural safety groups comprised of community stakeholders. These groups collect data about the local crime problem and then determine the best crime prevention techniques to solve the problem. The objective of this strategy is to encourage community members to deal with community and nuisance problems, example, lack of activities for youth, lack of transportation, etc., rather than rely on police for non-criminal matters. Through this approach, specific community problems have been dealt with, including reducing the number of youth hanging around, organizing the community to pick up litter, and reducing vandalism through better lighting and pruned hedges. The second type of situational prevention programs in the rural context are based on reducing the opportunities for crime to occur. In an American study of farm theft, the researchers theorized that more attractive targets will be stolen more often. Crime victimization will be more likely when farm operations are in close proximity to potential offenders, as well as more exposed and less guarded. The researchers found that items that are easily transportable are most likely to be stolen. They also found that farms on flat terrain and with a large acreage experienced more crime victimization. Finally, farms that did not utilize security measures like locking or hiding equipment used traditional protective measures like example honing a dog, or where owners were less able to see or monitor their property were more likely to experience victimization. Recommendations for preventions include increasing the security of farm buildings and equipment or creating a centralized database of identification numbers for farm equipment and rural hotspot policing where vulnerable areas receive proactive policing and crime prevention initiatives. However, in one Australian study of property crime on rural farms, farm security had no impact on victimization rates. What did make a difference was the proximity of the farm to urban centers, whether or not farm buildings were visible from the farm residents, and the condition of the terrain to access the farm. Now, in this module, we looked at how crime is a significant problem for rural communities and is not confined to big cities. There are many ways in which crime committed in rural areas is different from crime committed in cities. Different targets for burglary and theft, for example, livestock, farm equipment, etc. Isolation from helping agencies for victims of domestic violence or individuals with drugs or alcohol abuse problems. Lack of police presence for individuals in the drug cultivation or production trade, and lack of opportunities for youth. These factors combine to make crime prevention in rural areas a unique challenge. Conventional programs of crime prevention suitable to rural areas include community watch, crime prevention through environmental design, and crime prevention through social development. Thank you students. Thank you for watching EPG Pathshala course on crime prevention.